Welcome to my second episode of the 80/20 podcast. Today I'm interviewing Dr. Andy Galpin, and if you have not heard of him, he is a professor of kinesiology at Cal State Fullerton and a scientist of human performance. He's been on podcasts with Dr. Andrew Huberman. He did a whole series around maximizing performance, and now he has his own show called Perform with Dr. Andy Galpin. He's the founder of BioMolecular Athlete, Rapid Health and Performance, Vitality Blueprint, which is performance blood work, video coming soon, Absolute Rest, which is sleep optimization. I did publish a video on that, and probably more to come. In today's episode, we'll talk about physical performance. I ask him questions around being a hybrid athlete, how to manage strength and endurance, if there's any kind of interference between the two. We dive into wearables and talking about recovery scores, sleep trackers, and whether or not you should be looking at this data to make training decisions. I was surprised to learn that I was doing some stuff wrong with that data. And lastly, we get into running performance and how to prevent injuries. Personally, I'm running the New York City Marathon later this year, so I was really excited and curious to learn how I could maximize my way there. Let's get into the podcast with Dr. Andy Galpin.
Andy, thank you for coming on. This is the 80/20 podcast, where we try to find ways and strategies to optimize our life and find the easiest solutions where it's low effort, high impact. I wanted to discuss today three major things, starting with training, talking a little bit about sleep, and then the wearables. The first question I have is, I know you've talked about the 9 principles of training. Can you kind of list those out quickly, what they are? And briefly, what each one is?
Yeah, you're referring to the 9 adaptations.
Yes, the 9 adaptations, yes.
Yeah, sure, I'll list them, but I really want to emphasize before I do that, it's not even that important that it's 9. Some people might chop those into 7, some might make 12 or 13. And so it's not the actual details here that matter, it's just the concept and framework is saying, if you're trying to get a certain outcome or goal, then there are some guiding principles you can use if you understand kind of what the general goal is. That'll actually tell you a lot about how to get there. And the reason I came up with them was that part. It is trying to help people understand, instead of me just rattling off like a workout. I can give you one workout, but that's not particularly helpful because the context changes everything. If you understand kind of the idea and how that differentiates from a different adaptation, you'll have way more power to modify your own workouts, your own training based on what you want, based on your context situation. So that all to say, starting at the very, very beginning, I call it skill. This is moving how you want to move and not moving how you don't want to move. This could be anything. It could be skill in terms of getting better at running technique. It could be skill in terms of hinging properly. It could be a movement-based thing. It could be skill in terms of, controlling a limb and not having it move when you don't want it to move. And so anything like that, it's just moving how you want to move and not how you want to move in whatever context. Yeah. So number 1 is skill. Number 2, then, as we move up, you're moving well, and now you need to be able to move fast. And so that is speed. From there, you can get into power, and the difference between speed and power is force production. So in fact, if you take force production, multiply that by speed, you have power. And so speed and power for a lot of the general population is just kind of the same thing, but for the true sporting context, they are quite different. And so if you need to differentiate there, you can, if you want to roll those into the same one. That's why I say it could be 7 or 9 or kind of whatever, right? I split them up though. So we've moved well, we're moving fast, we're moving powerfully. As I just said, a part of power is speed, and a part of it is force. So the next one up the chain then is force production. You're going to think of that as strength, right? Can you produce a certain amount of newtons of force into the ground or into an object, and can you express that into physical strength, right? So you will call it that thing, right? From there, then, you think about muscle force production, and everything below that has been about outcome. Right? How well can you move, how fast can you move, etc. Now we're moving into the first attribute, which is not really a function of movement at all. It is a function of just simply muscle size. So that is muscle hypertrophy. The physical size, right? There's obviously a correlation between muscle size and muscle function. There's obviously not the same thing though. Those are clearly differentiated stuff. So we moved into strength and into physical size. And then we're gonna come right back into functionality and think about muscular endurance. So this is your ability to repeat force contractions over a given amount of time or repetitions. Think of this as how many push-ups can you do in a minute? How many pull-ups can you do? This is not running a mile, right? That is a different type of endurance we'll get to in a second. But this is specifically local muscle contraction, typically, where you're repeating the contraction kind of multiple times, somewhere in the range of 2 to 100 reps or something like that. Once you get into the thousands of repetitions, it's not actually being determined by the fatigue of the local muscle. You have now systemic fatigue happening. And that's where we roll into our next set of categories, which are generally your endurance categories, okay? And so obviously muscular endurance is endurance, but now we're talking about systemic endurance for the most part. Very first one is what we call anaerobic endurance. And so this is oftentimes more than one muscle group. It can be localized, but it's typically more than one muscle group. And this is your ability to produce a ton of work in 30 seconds to maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes, something like that. This is an all-out 400-yard sprint. This is something like that, where the fatigue will be real. It will be real high, but you can't do it slowly. Right? It has to be maximum effort, maximum fatigue. And the fatigue tends to happen, this is where you're often going to throw up, things like that, because the fatigue is so high across the entire system. Can be a single muscle, but it's generally longer duration than, again, 20, 30, 40 reps, something like that. Past that, we're now into what we call maximum aerobic capacity, or VO2 max. And now we're definitely getting way further outside of a single muscle or muscle group, for that matter. And we're really testing the maximum ability of your entire central and peripheral system. Meaning, can you bring in and utilize oxygen? That's a function of your cardiovascular system, your lungs, your pulmonary system. Then can you transport it throughout your blood? And can you get it into working tissue? Can your tissue, in this case muscle, use that effectively? So there's a central component, lungs, things like that. And there's a peripheral component, the actual electrolyzing muscle, the blood handling pH changes, and all those things. That typically takes you now from 4 to 5 minutes up to like 15 minutes, but this is maximum, right? So this is getting to a maximum heart rate or close or something like that. Past that is our last category, which is now steady state, longer duration. This is submaximal by definition. It is still fatigue and pain and hard and all those things, but we're not going to heart rate max. It is how long can we sustain input over time through a single or multiple movement pattern. So in general, that's how I categorize the different adaptations, and we can sort of go from there and why that matters, or we can leave entirely.
So the reason I asked that question is because I remember seeing this chart of interference, where certain categories do interfere with each other. And there is this new trending, I guess, form of training, which is like hybrid athlete training, where people want to build strength and hypertrophy while at the same time trying to extend their steady state endurance and things like that. And a common question I always hear is like, how do you grow both? Obviously, you can't be exceptional at both, but how can you set guidelines to be able to be good or somewhat great at both those categories? Yeah,
so by both, you mean long duration, steady state, and maximal strength or size, or?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Kind of both. Okay, right. So you can chop this a couple of different ways. You actually sort of alluded to the answer. One philosophy would be you're going to get a little bit of both. So you could do them, and you realize you're not going to get maximal gains in either one, but you'll get some progress in both. The other one would be, let's do the opposite, and let's say we'll focus on one at a time, maximize our benefit there, continue and do what we can to maintain that while we're transitioning to the other one. That's totally fine. Either one of those is acceptable. Unfortunately, there is no like clear, hey, this one's better. Because it's dependent upon a lot of things, namely your timeline. Are you looking for this in 6 weeks? Are you looking about this because you're concerned about, say, longevity? And you really are interested in the next 40 to 50 years. Those are all very different answers. The nice part about it is either approach is fine. A combination is absolutely fine. So I think the big message I want to say here is like, you won't get nothing. No matter what you do, maybe you're screwing it up, you're not optimizing for the next 6 weeks, but you're not getting nothing. You're not wasting your time. You didn't blow an entire 2 months of exercise training. You alluded to this, there is some interference effect such that typically strength training does not compromise endurance performance at all. Unless you're trying to maximize time or like a sport or something like that. That said, long duration stuff can at some point have an interference effect with muscle growth specifically. It's not as serious as people have portrayed it, and myself even included in that one. There's more and more data actually that have come out that suggests like the interference effect of endurance work on muscle hypertrophy is not as big a deal as we used to think. There are some context that needs to be applied there for you to truly understand, is it going to matter for you or not? So the type of activities you're doing, how much endurance you're doing, what's your overall caloric intake, what's your training status, all of these things modify how much or little that stuff will interfere with maximal muscle growth. And so like what I always like to do in these cases are, let's plant flags on the extreme, let's get those out of the way, and then we'll talk about the gray, because that's really where this stuff becomes confusing. So on the extreme, if you were trying to run the fastest marathon possible, training for muscle hypertrophy, when you're trying to maximize marathon running, is probably going to interfere. You've gained physical weight, which slows you down. That style of training does not benefit, make you faster or stronger for the most part. And you've exhausted a lot of recovery resources. You need to put the miles in, put the work in to run the marathon faster, and you're blowing that on, pec deck. Like your recovery capacity is gone. That extreme example is pretty easy. It doesn't mean you can't lift weights, because you should, but you shouldn't train to maximize muscle hypertrophy. Right? That's the flag we're putting here. Again, we're making extreme on purpose. The other direction is also obvious. If you're trying to maximize muscle growth, we shouldn't be running 150 miles a week. Clearly going to interfere. The question is, where does it lie in the middle? Okay, can I run 50 miles a week? Can I run 5 miles a week? What about I jog a lap around the track as my warm-up? Like, okay, these are all now different answers. Typically, and to kind of go quickly through it, if you're trying to gain a lot of muscle and strength, and you're doing a lot of running activities, and I'm specifically calling out running, that is more likely to interfere. If you contrast that to swimming or cycling, there's less of an interference effect, as the data currently stand with those. And that's simply because the eccentric landing and loading on the tissue is lower. Easier to recover. If you're doing 15 or 20 minutes or so of steady state, it's probably not affecting your muscle growth whatsoever. If you're highly trained, probably more of an interference effect. If you're lowly trained, in fact, not only is there less of an interference effect, but there might be augmentation. There's actually been a handful of studies that came out in the last year that showed even doing like 6 weeks of pure steady state conditioning, endurance work, prior to hypertrophy training. So again, you're thinking like 6 to 8 weeks of hypertrophy. I can't remember exactly what they did. Actually augmented muscle growth, rather than the group that didn't do the 6 weeks of straight endurance training. Okay. What you're seeing there is a clear indication of if you have a lack of baseline fitness and then you go into hypertrophy training, you're not going to recover as well. You're not going to respond as well. And so not only was there not interference there, again, it was advantageous. So it's really impossible for us to give you an honest and a fair and a true answer of going like, always do it this way. Always do your cardio first. Because it's honestly not the case. It would be unfair for me to say that, and it would be flat out wrong. And I know it's wrong. So I can't give like a always do it this way when I know that that answer is just absolutely not true for many of you listening.
And what are some principles maybe that are frameworks to simplify the thought of like, okay, I am just getting into exercise, or I am intermediate, or I'm advanced. I should try to follow these guidelines in some sort of way so that way I can achieve both.
What you want to think about is there something that is a giant hole in your ship? If it's not a giant hole in your ship, then it's a different answer. That is the easiest way I can explain it, such that if you go for a walk, for a 30-minute walk, and that is very taxing, then like we don't need to worry about the interference effect. I don't care what you're doing. You have to go to a baseline of fitness before this stuff matters. If we're talking about your conditioning, your zone 2 or whatever that you're trying to do there is literally walking, you can walk as many miles as you want. For the most part, it ain't going to interfere with the biggest bodybuilder's effect. Like that's probably egregious, but you get the point, right? For most people, like that's not at all going to be part of our conversation. If you're in the middle, if you feel like your physical fitness is compromising your recovery, then at that point it might be worth you investing and saying, hey, look, I need to spend this time, whether it is putting a couple of sessions in per week, or whether it is stepping all the way back and adding just a full period of your training where that is really the benefit. So there are a number of metrics I would look at across a bunch of different things, and it's honestly quite hard to like lay them all out in like 10 seconds because there's a lot of ways you could do it. But the easiest way I could say is like if you're looking and doing an honest assessment and you're looking at your muscle size and strength, and then you're comparing that to your fitness, and one of them, if they're comparable, or you can't like clearly discern one is worse than the other one, then I would say you could probably do this however you want. But if it is a very clear, I don't even need to know numbers, your muscle size or strength or cardiovascular fitness is way behind the other one, then to me, putting your eggs in that basket is almost surely going to get you the 80-20 results of your thing. So that's what I would do. You don't need to know the numbers. You don't need to have a DEXA scan. You don't need to have a Springbok analysis and have all of your muscle size measured, identified. If you can look and go, look, like I'm really under-muscled or under weak, or compared to other people in the gym that are your cohort, that'll probably give most people a pretty good answer.
Cool.
And if they're close, again, do whatever you want then.
I know you mentioned something about recovery, understanding how well you're recovering from these different exercises. What are some of the easiest ways to measure recovery, whether it's in a free method or using technology?
We've done this a lot over the years, and there are a substantial amount of performers who can give the most accurate answer of their overall global recovery can simply be a subjective questionnaire. How you feel? And we have tracked many of our professional athletes where we have tracked urine, saliva, blood, physical performance tests, sleep every day for years. We have years of daily data on all of these things. How you feeling today? Still tells us pretty much the same answer. We have advanced algorithms we've used. We've built software like these things, and like there. For us, in the same answer, there is a substantial amount of these people who there is zero correlation to that answer of how you feel today and their actual recovery. Like none whatsoever. Like I don't even ask the question because you're completely unreliable. Not only you have the subset of people who just like, that's their default answer, but then you have some people who like legitimately, they don't have a good perception of how they're actually feeling. And then you have some that are elite at it. Like they're just elite. They will literally tell you their HRV score without looking at anything. And they'll be right there on the dial. So you can take this big and small, right? Now, what I would recommend then is spending some time using some technology, and you'll be able to very quickly figure out if you're A or B, right? One of those extreme flags. And then in the middle, it gets tricky. I generally would advise against using any recovery score on any wearable. No offense to any of the companies, but like readiness scores or recoveries or any of those things, I have found zero utility in them. And we've coached, of course, a lot of athletes, but we've coached way more non-athletes, executives, regular people, parents, business owners, travelers, things like that than we have athletes, way more. And it doesn't line up for anybody for the most part. Like some individual people, but like we totally disregard those scores. They are generally useless. If you want to use something like an HRV, it's okay. And we do look at it, but they're not super actionable. The honest reality is because you look at the score typically, and there's a normal deviation that happens. Okay, so if you take let's just make a number. Let's just call your HRV score of 100. Okay, depending on which wearable, like you were talking earlier, like the wearables give you totally different scores, right?
Yeah.
You can wear multiple on the same day, and you're going to get wildly different scores, right?
Yeah.
So you already know that's the case. Now within that, there's going to be normal variation. So if your typical score in your wearable is 100, you might wake up at 85. Now, is that actionable? Or is that normal? Like, do you really need to do anything different today because it was 85? What about 80? What about 78? What about 71? Like, where's the line where it's like, now you're fatigued? Yeah. Like, I don't know, right? If you go to the people who do like hard math and this stuff, and there's a lot of people that do it, what they're going to tell you is the best approach. I'm going to tell you right now, I think this is unrealistic, but this is actually accurate. I don't do it, but this is the best way. Track your HRV for at least a month, okay? Now, within that, you need to have your average, and then you need to calculate your own standard deviation. So maybe 10 is normal for you. Maybe 30 is normal for someone else. I can tell you right now, my variation in my HRV is way higher than my wife's. Hers is really tight. If she deviates by 10%, something happened. If I deviate by 15%, nothing happened. Like if I don't see more than a 25% change in my, like I don't even glance at it. Because I'm just like, I just swing, like I'm way up there. Okay, so you got to figure that standard deviation out for you. And I can't give you a number on that because as I just explained to you, it's clearly, and we've done this on hundreds of people now, that deviation is totally wild. Secondly, okay, I'll just use me as an example. My wife, I have 2 little kids. I have businesses to run. I have my personal health practice. I have all these things, right? If my normal HRV is 100 and I wake up at 75, I don't give a shit. Like if today is the only day I have to work out, like I'm working out and I'm not backing off. Like I don't have that flexibility. It's the 80-20, right? Like the benefit to risk there is not worth me skipping a workout because now I might not get to train the next, whatever. Like there's not enough there. If I wake up and my HRV is 10 instead of 100, I still don't give a shit. Like that's my day to train. Like I'm going to get it done because I'm, like other things there's too many moving parts here. And so So I say, like, you can track it if you want, but I just don't see it to be super, super actionable. I promise you, if I wake up and my HRV is 10, I didn't need my tracker. I am clearly feeling very, very, very bad at that point. So I just don't see, for many people, a huge value of, like, and it's nothing pro or con HRV, but in the average person's case, like, you can check it if it's, like, fun and interesting, but, like, should you use that to guide your training? Man, I don't think so. We've prepared a number of people for, like, the marathons and stuff like that, like non-athletes. It can help in that case if you have, like, hey, we have this training thing. But if this is like you just exercise, you work out, you train, it's okay. But it's a dime, and other things in your life are $50. So it just doesn't matter as much. It's not zero. It's not fake. It's not wrong. But I just don't find them practically useful.
I'm kind of going off of wearables because I do love, they're like my toys. I play with them a lot. I know one thing that I've noticed is around sleep tracking for wearables. Like, what are some metrics that we can look at and trust, in your opinion? And what are some metrics that we should not be optimizing for and looking at?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest ones that you're going to have the most impact on, people are aware of sleep duration. How long are you sleeping? That's a very good one. But your consistency. Like, how consistent are you at going to bed at roughly the same time? Plus or minus, 30 minutes. If you ask, Jeff, he's probably going to tell you like 20, 40, 30, 40. Like, you got to be a human, right? At some point, it's fine. I think a lot of people hopefully are aware, but sleep duration is not as important as consistency. So just be consistent and try to go to bed at like roughly the same time. Those tracking wearables will really help you with that type of stuff to be somewhat consistent. Those are really good ones. Obviously, the bad things are the algorithm scores, the sleep score. Hopefully I made the point earlier about like the recovery score or the whatever one, right? I don't think you should pay 2 seconds of attention to your sleep staging, your deep sleep score, your REM sleep score. There's a whole host of reasons why. I'm starting off with it's just scientifically very clear at this point that they're not accurate. They're 80-ish% or so, depending on which company you use. So if you want to get a rough idea, but that 20%, that's the part that matters anyways. So like it just doesn't there. The second part is there's a huge misunderstanding, and you may have heard this stuff from Josh already, but there's a huge misunderstanding in the fact of thinking, if I said, hey, look, you should have the exact same HRV every day, you'd be like, no, I shouldn't, because you're not asking your body to do the same thing every day. Some days you put more stress on it. The body adapts with stress. If you're trying to work out, you're trying to put stress on the body. You put stress on the body so that it will adapt and change, right? The stress is required. And so if you're then measuring stress on your body, you should see more stress. That's the point. Great. I know I overloaded the system. And so we don't expect the same HRV every day. That'd be silly. You also don't expect it to be as high as possible every day. That's not good, right? You want your HRV down, because that indicates you're overloading stress. That indicates adaptation. If you're maximizing for recovery, look, I'm coming back to the point here. It may feel like I'm realizing to you guys that I'm off track here, but I'm circling back to make a point with sleep stages here, okay? You get to play a game every day of optimization versus adaptation. If you're constantly optimizing, you're undercutting adaptation. If you're constantly adapting, you're not optimizing. You cannot do both at the same time. As like I realize I'm like 4 layers into analogies here, but I'll come with one more. If you optimized for today right now, you would walk out of this interview right now, you'd drive down to the beach, you'd hang out, you'd drink some tequila, you'd have a pizza, like that would be an optimal day, right? You would feel your best. But that's clearly not going to be best for your long-term adaptations, right? You can't always be peaking. That's not the point. If you do the opposite, if you never took a day to go in the sunshine, if you never took a day with your friends or do whatever it is that you feel is best, and because you're always worried about, short term, just like, invest in the future, that means you're never present. You're never realizing the results of your work. So you need to balance optimization and adaptation. In this particular case of HRV, that was the example, right? So some days it should be lower. And some days it should be higher. What am I striving for? Am I trying to, if I'm in the off season, like right now we've got, I'll give you an example. We have the Masters coming up here pretty soon, depending on when this comes out. So right now, we're trying to peak for the Masters for our golfers, okay? This is the biggest deal of the year. We were not trying to peak for them in January. So our scores are lower in January on purpose. because this is when we're investing in adaptation, but now as we're getting closer, we want to get more optimization. We're pushing more towards optimization. We're bringing in more optimization tools and strategies and metrics. And then great, when this is over, we go through different things. So we have different phases throughout the year. Our NFL players are in adaptation mode. Season's a long time away. Like, we're pushing adaptation. Our scores are not great. They shouldn't be, right? When we get closer to those, you get the idea. If you take that exact same thing and apply that to sleep stages, why do we think we should just have the most amount of deep sleep every single night? It wouldn't make any sense, and it doesn't make any sense, right? You shouldn't be maximizing and optimizing your deep sleep or your REM sleep. There's a reason your brain is putting you in sleep stages. Let the brain do what it wants to do. What you asked it to do that day differs every day, right? A day on the beach drinking tequila is a different cognitive demand than a day when you're shooting 6 hours of content, contracts, like all the stuff that is really cognitively demanding, hard decisions, right? So why would we expect your brain to go through the same recovery process when it was under different loads throughout the day? It wouldn't make any sense, right? When you're trying to learn a new language and you're trying to do other things, and then also you train really hard and you did balance work and you did all this stuff why are we expecting the sleep stages? So number one, it shouldn't be the same every day. Number two, we shouldn't be pushing higher, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? The analogy here would be, if I said, hey, if you're dehydrated, drinking water is great. But if you're hyperhydrated, drinking water is not good. More is not better there. More can kill you. You're not going to die because you had too much deep sleep. But you get the point here, right? There is a line it wants to be in. And so if you are clearly in dysfunction, then you want to make sure that you remove that dysfunction. But if it's not that, just like getting a higher score, especially if you're using pharmaceuticals to do that. Because now you're really hitting an override lever there, and you're overriding a system with really high potent, high concentration stuff, and it's probably not a tremendous idea. So all that too, on top of the fact that the technology you're using is known to be inaccurate there. Even if it was, though, it's still a bad idea.
So I think one thing I see a lot is also like Instagram ads that show, the deep sleep before and after because of our supplement. So in that scenario, right, don't trust it, don't buy it.
No, I mean, most likely it didn't work. Very unlikely to be real. Even if it is, again, going back to the fundamental question of why. Why did you want more deep sleep? So the deep sleep thing is actually just like a funny nomenclature thing. If I hear deep sleep, I'm like, oh, I want deep sleep. People just assume they mean restful sleep, right? Like, you want to be rested when you sleep, but that's not necessarily what happens with deep sleep. Deep sleep is just a name of a stage. If you have 6 hours of deep sleep a night, you're going to feel terrible. You're going to feel terrible because that means you missed out on all the other very critical stages. People act as if it's like the only thing that happens good in sleep is during deep sleep. It's like, well, there's a lot of other stuff happening in all the other stages of sleep that are very important to your brain. So if you're using drugs to come in and hammer this one particular part and those other parts don't get done, there's going to be consequences there, right? One thing we can all agree on sleep staging, you don't want to be up at night. You should be going to sleep and then waking up the next morning. The least amount, and the answer optimal would be 0. Waking events you could have at night is optimal. From there, the sleep stages will take care of themselves. So if you are not having long enough duration, if you are not consistent, if your onset is more than 15 minutes or so, if you're waking up very lethargic, either throughout the next day or in the morning, and you're waking up more than once per night, that stuff is the stuff that you take action on. The sleep staging is almost totally irrelevant. And I haven't even got into the entire scientific argument behind sleep staging being kind of whack anyways. So there's a whole different layer that we can get into there of the scientific merit to begin with of all those things, which I just don't find compelling at all, to be honest. But we don't have to touch that because hopefully the foundation I just laid is the stuff that matters. So if you're feeling great the next day, you're not waking up at night, you're sleeping consistently, that's the only lever you need to push. And if you aren't having those things, taking a drug specifically or a supplement that acts on one of those stages is not solving the core issue.
Okay, so the last question, I think, I've read that you mentioned a lot about the importance of adherence, progressive overload, and training. Yeah. I'm planning to run a marathon in April and then another one in September. And I think running has become very popular these days. And one thing that goes along with that is injury. A lot of people I know that start getting into running get injured a lot. are some tools and strategies that you think people can use to prevent injury and also perform at their best if they're trying to train for a marathon?
Number one, you have to move well. The biggest reason that people get hurt with running, there's more injuries with running than just about any activity, by the way, to move well. So in this particular case, invest in at least a movement screen, a running screen. Hire a coach, hire a service at some point that can just watch you run, even if it's one time, right? You want to avoid catastrophe here. Do you need to optimize your gait for speed? No, but you want to make sure someone can look at it and go, yep, you're definitely a walking knee injury, right? And even a moderately skilled running coach can see that. And I'm saying that to say, because you're going to pay that bill, like literally anyways. Because when you get hurt, you're going to have to then either stop the running or go pay somebody to fix the problem. You're going to buy new shoes. Like, you're going to spend the money anyways. So if you have any ability to afford some diagnostic there, then that's where I would start. So maybe I shouldn't say you have to run well. Maybe I should say you just have to run well enough. Okay, like well enough, because what's going to happen is a lot of the times people go, well, I run decently. I'm fine. I've never been hurt from running. It's like, okay, that's great. That was true at 12 miles a week. Is that going to be true when you 4x that number? Maybe, maybe not. But a small injury gets magnified when you triple the volume, right? And that's what's going to happen. So you're going to end up running, before your marathon, I assume, like probably close to 30 plus miles a week. It would be very conservative, right? So if you're running, I run 3 miles a day, 5 days a week, that's 15 miles. You're going to at least double, again, more realistically, triple that number before you do that marathon. So things will show up now. And so cutting them off at the beginning would be the very first step. Then from there, just having some sort of structure and game plan, right? You can use advanced things where you're monitoring and tracking your progress, and you're adapting your training program on that if you want. But if not, just continuing to have some sort of system. The volume overload is important. You have to get there. The miles have to come, but you can't also pack them on too soon. So in the case of like an amateur marathon, 10% would be the rough number we would say in terms of volume. Don't add more than 10% per week. So do not make the mistake of this. Okay, I run 2 miles 5 days a week. That's 10 miles. Okay, great. Next week, I'll go to 3 miles. It wasn't 3 miles. That was 3 miles every single day. So now you went from 10 miles to 15 miles. That's a 50% increase. And then the next week, you're going to go to 4 miles. Great. So now over 2 weeks, you've doubled your volume. You might survive, but probably not. Right? And so that 10% number like holds pretty decent to say, okay, you did 10 miles this week, get to 11. Now, you can go a little more aggressive than 10%. But you get the point here. You don't want to go to 50%. Like, how many weeks in a row can you double your volume or 50% your volume before all of a sudden the system did not have time to adapt to that thing? So being more strategic. If you've got your April date and you've got the September date after that, you start at the April date and walk backwards and say, okay, this is the amount of volume. And in this case, to be really clear, I'm just saying running miles. Like, there's other volume that'll be in your training, but let's just make it easy. Let's just say running miles. What does that last week look like? There's the prep week and tapering. What's the last working week look like? How many total miles was that? Figure out what that is. I did X on Monday, Tuesday. Are you doing intervals? Are we doing fartleks? What are we tempo runs? Like, how's that week to me? Build that last week. Then you work backwards, right? So you work backwards all the way to this week and say, okay, in that particular case, I'm here. How do I get from there, from where I'm at currently, and then how do I layer that stuff on? Do I need to deload in between there? Do I not? How much time do I have? And then how can I progress to that volume appropriately? People tend to go the opposite. They start now and think, what do I do next week? That's not the approach. Go to the end. What does that last week have to look like to be success? And then how do we fill that thing in?
It's like reverse engineering.
100%. Yeah. That's how we build all of our fight camps for our UFC fighters. All of it, right? You always start at the end goal. What do we need to get to? And then how do we build these things in? And then you fill it in with life, which is to say, okay, that's great. I think I need to take a deload on this week. However, I'm going to be traveling that. Okay, great. It would actually make sense just based on not physiology, but my life schedule, my travel, that maybe I'll take this deload when I'm traveling a bunch that week. That way it's going to be hectic anyways. I'll do some maintenance runs, things like that. But I'm not trying to do this super hard week when I'm also have this other big priority that week. It'd be stupid to do that.
Awesome. And where can people find you? What are some of the best places on social, whatever it is?
Yeah, Instagram and Twitter, Dr. Andy Galpin are most convenient places for me. And then YouTube is where I have, it's basically science communication there. So we got a little series that I do called 5, 25, and 55-minute physiology. We just dive into the physiology of different aspects of performance. And then depending on when you're listening to this, I will have my own modified show called Perform with Dr. Andy Galpin. And that'll be on all the podcast platforms and up on the YouTube page as well.
Cool. And then you also have a couple of health optimization companies.
Oh, yeah.
Which I know there's blood work, there's sleep, and there's another one too, I think.
Yeah, we have everything. We, of course, have Absolute Rest, which is our cornerstone sleep project there. We have that. We actually just, in April 1st, 2024, launched our premium performance blood work company called Vitality Blueprint. And that's going phenomenally well already. Like, we knew that was going to go well, but holy hell, has that become very popular. Blood work, all through that stuff as well. Our full immersive coaching program, where we take care of everything for you, is at Rapid Health and Performance. And then we have an education company called BioMolecular Athlete, where we actually have a toolkit course for designing your own training and nutrition programs that is available. And that's also like done stunningly well. So education, coaching, sleep, blood work, all available.
Awesome. Yeah, if you're interested in any of those, please go check them out. Find them on socials. Thank you so much, Dr. Andy Galpin. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.